Welcome to this tax compliance video. My name's Kieran Doe. I'm a senior tutor at ACA Masters. When I sat the ACA exams myself, I won multiple prizes from ICAEW. In this class, I'm going to offer my advice on what you should do in terms of your preparation for your TC exam, and also some key tips of things you should do in the exam itself. So firstly, we focus on exam preparation, so what you should be doing in the build-up to your TC exam. You firstly need to break TC down by topic. TC is a very big syllabus, and there is a lot of detail for each individual tax. And if you were to try and tackle income tax altogether, you would almost certainly become overwhelmed by the volume of content. So therefore, it's important to break it down into smaller topics. So for example, the way we break down our TC video course, we break it down into the different types of income, so employment, trading, property, pensions, etc. And then also look at the different elements of specific areas where there are larger topics. So you can see with CGT, for example, basics, reliefs, and international aspects. Corporation tax, basics, reliefs, losses in groups, and then admin as a separate part. VAT, basics, international, capital goods schemes, groups, etc. So you can take each tax and then break it down into smaller topics and smaller question types as well. So sometimes you might be breaking it down into a topic or breaking it down into a specific question type, like the net income and expense questions, or where you have to do the full income tax computation, covering all of the different schedules of income. So doing it like this will make it much more manageable in terms of your preparation. So then what you need to do for each topic is make sure that you have understood the key content and memorize the parts that you need to memorize. Obviously, some information is included in the open book, but there is a huge amount of content that you still need to learn for TC. And then immediately after you have understood the technical content and memorized the key points, you should then start practicing exam questions so that you can test yourself in the context that you're actually going to be examined in. And then you can mark your answer and read the examiner's comments to understand key points and see where you've done well and where you've dropped marks, and appreciate what things the examiner was looking for and the common weaknesses in student scripts, so you can make sure that you don't make those same mistakes. So for example, if we start with the first topic, like employment income, you should firstly understand what employment income is and how it's taxed. And then you're going to need to make sure that you've understood how different types of employee remuneration are taxed. So for example, how cash amounts are taxed and how that compares with benefits. For example, cash is generally subject to income tax and national insurance on the employee, and the employer will pay Class 1 secondary national insurance. However, with benefits, the employee will only pay income tax on taxable benefits, and the employer will pay Class 1A national insurance. So it's important that you firstly kind of understand the technical principles here, and then you can focus on learning how each different benefit is taxed. Cash is generally more straightforward, but with the benefits, there are specific rules for lots of benefits. For example, accommodation, cars, vans, loans, assets for private use, etc. And that differs whether it's just for private use or it's actually been transferred to the individual. And then, of course, there are a lot of benefits which are exempt. So then you can focus on kind of understanding the rules and then memorizing the content that you need to learn. So one good way of doing this is, making sure that you've kind of understood it, understand how all the calculations worked, understood the conceptual point that individuals don't pay national insurance on benefits. Employers pay national insurance on cash and benefits, but it's a different type of national insurance, and there's 0% bands here, but there isn't here. And then once you've done that, understood it conceptually, then you can focus on memorizing the calculations for each specific benefit. So once you've understood it and you feel as though you've learned it, then you can just test yourself over and over again. So you could just pull up a blank page and see if you can reproduce the taxable benefits, which benefits are exempt, and then with the taxable benefits, the specific calculations. And then you can go back and check and see, have you done this correctly? Which ones have you missed out? And then try to do it again until you can reproduce them all, because then, of course, that shows that you have learnt them and you've got them like ingrained into your brain, ready to use in the exam. So once you've done that, and even if you don't feel like you've quite mastered them all, but you've kind of got most of them, then you can go and start practicing exam questions. So you can go to some recent exam questions and then just go to the part on employment income. You get a bigger question like this, perhaps. Calculate the income tax payable for the individual. No, it's a really big question, but there's a section on employment. You've got some trading income as well, and some property income, and probably made some pension contributions. So there's all the different areas of income tax in this question, but there's a nice little bit here on employment income, the bit you've just been focusing on, and then go away and just practice that part of the question. And then you're actively testing yourself on that knowledge you've just learned. So that will help you kind of apply it and help you ensure that you've learned it. But the most important part as well is you're testing yourself in the exact scenario you're going to be examined on. Getting straight into the exam questions, you'll familiarize yourself with how the examiners word things, the piece of information they include in there, sometimes to almost catch us out, but really to just test that you've actually understood the technical principles. You'll see the way things are worded. You'll see the way the information is typically structured. So you'll start to build up your familiarity with what the exam is going to look and feel like. And of course, you're actively testing yourself on that knowledge you have just learned. So you can go away and practice, several questions one after the other. Just make sure that after you've practiced a question, you mark your answer so that you can see obviously which parts you got right and which parts you got incorrect. So for example, if you've made a mistake, maybe with the car, you deducted the employee's contribution in full, but then you see in the answer, oh, they only deducted 5K, why was that? And then you realize, oh, I forgot the rule that the employee capital contribution is capped at 5K, for example. And that's kind of a really valuable process of going through that, because you'll remember that, you'll learn from your mistakes. And next time you see this come up, you'll remember that 5K rule. So it's important that you go away and mark your answer and appreciate the points you got incorrect and understand and learn why they were incorrect so that you can make sure you correct those for next time. And then, like I said, read the examiner's comments as well, really useful resource, that because they'll say what typical mistakes that students make, and therefore you can make sure that you don't make those same mistakes. So once you've done that for one question, you can then go away and practice several questions one after the other. If you're using our materials, we list out all of the questions which examine, like employment income, for example. So you can just go through and practice several questions. You don't have to do them all now. I generally suggest going away and practicing the more recent ones first of all. So you can then go away and just practice several questions one after the other, and you'll really start to see the familiarity and repetition in the questions, and you can just focus on conquering this one topic. And it makes it so much more manageable doing like this. Just focus on employment income. You can go and do a question in probably kind of like 10, 15 minutes and just get through, as many as you can. And this will just really enable you to master each topic one at a time. You can then move on to the next topic. So you can then move on to trading income, looking at unincorporated businesses. So that would be the next area to cover. So you again appreciate how trading income is taxed. Obviously, it goes into the income tax computation, understand which national insurance contributions apply to it. But then again, understand the calculation of how we get to the trading income. So, of course, we know the accounting profit includes expenses which might not be allowable for tax. So therefore, there's lots of rules around which expenses are allowable or how certain income is taxed. Does it need to be taken out of here and taxed elsewhere? But again, as I've said previously, and just as we did, and as we'll do for all of the topics, make sure you've understood the rules. So you need to disallow amounts on tangible fixed assets because capital allowances are claimed instead, and therefore all of these assets get a specific amount of what is effectively tax depreciation. You can't deduct an appropriation of profit because we're taxing the business owner on the profit that they've made. So this is what we're calculating the tax on. They're being taxed on the trading income, the profits of the business. So obviously you couldn't deduct an amount for paying a salary, to them. That's illogical. So you can just go through and firstly understand all of the rules. And some of them are very specific, and therefore you just need to kind of like memorize exactly what is allowable. For example, things on like gifts, for example, very specific rules there. Fines, a specific exemption for like parking fines incurred by an employee. So again, you could just do this in the same approach. Make sure you have understood the key content, but then you can test yourself. Can you reproduce it? Can you list all the expenses which are disallowable? Or at least, if you've got a reminder of the amounts here, can you actually specifically say which amounts are allowable and which amounts are disallowable, or what the rule is? So you could have like leased cars as a reminder. What's the rule? Disallow a certain percentage if it's more than the CO2 emissions threshold. So you can do that and make sure you've understood that key content, but then immediately after, just go and practice some questions. So you feel like, yes, I've got a good understanding of the rules now. I think I've learned most of them. Now I'll go and practice some questions. So in exactly the same way as we did with employment income, as you'll do with any topic, then you can just go away and practice several questions, one after the other. So you could go here and you've got the different amounts for the business. You could calculate the trading income. So once again, not only are you going to be testing yourself on that knowledge that you've just learned, so you're actively testing yourself. Most importantly, you're doing it in this scenario you're going to be examined on. These are the best questions to practice. These are the only questions that you need to practice, because you can just break it down. These are very small questions once you break it down. So you can just practice a calculation of trading income. And you're doing it in the context you're examined. So you'll see the different ways examiners might structure the question. Sometimes you'll get the income and the expenses like this. Other times you'll be given like the accounting profit and all the expenses have been deducted. So you need to like add them back if they're disallowable. Other times you'll be given like a draft trading profit figure and you'll be told the following amounts have not been included. And therefore, if they're allowable, you'll need to deduct them. So that's really important that you get used to the exam questions and the different ways they might be structured. And that's what we do on the course. I'll go through every kind of different type of exam question as well. So you can see the different ways the examiners structure the questions to really test your understanding of the rules. And therefore, whether do you need to add it back or do you need to deduct it this time or do you do nothing? So really important that you not only do exam questions so that you're testing yourself on the knowledge you've learned, but you see the way the questions are structured, the different ways the examiners will word it. So then again, just go through and practice lots of questions, one after the other on that topic. And then we just do it for all of the topics. So then you just go through and then like cash basis, almost really a subset of trading income, just a specific basis for calculating it rather than using accruals basis. And then once we've got the trading profit, you can allocate it to the partners and then you can allocate it to like the tax years. So you can just keep going through each topic, but then yeah, as soon as you've understood the content, then just go away and practice some questions on it. And actually breaking TC down like this makes it so much more manageable, and you'll understand the logic as well of how the tax code works. And then we just keep going through it, and you'll just end up mastering one topic at a time, just small steps, one at a time. So of course, what you need to do is build like a study plan to make sure that you cover each topic. So you can see kind of all of the topics listed here, all relatively small in isolation, but obviously you've got a certain amount of time between, when you start your exam preparation and the exam, and you need to make sure that you cover all of the topics and leave enough time at the end so you can start attempting full exams a few weeks before the actual exam. So of course, there's lots of different ways you do this, but just to give you my experience and my insight, something that I used to do would be to just kind of almost really build up a map of, my life for the few months before the exam. So what I would firstly do is just kind of have all the different like time slots really, and obviously everybody's life looks very different, but I'd have all of the time slots, all of the days, and then I'd kind of put in all of my commitments. So if, for example, working 9 to 5, certainly up until the first few weeks before the exam, then you'd obviously have work at these times. Always, of course, make sure you put in time for what other commitments that you have, or whatever else it is you like to do. For me personally, I exercise regularly, so I would put in, all of my gym times, for example. That isn't something I would compromise on. I saw that as kind of really important to not only just my general health, but also my exam preparation. Keeping fit and healthy and eating well is really important, of course, for your mental state and brain performance. So, I always saw that as kind of non-negotiable, and equally, like sleep is so important as well. So I, always just call it a day, at a certain time in the evening. So once I've kind of put everything in, which is like non-negotiable, then I would see what time is left. And I think, well, I've got a bit of time before work during the week. Lunchtime can probably watch a video or maybe do a couple of questions. And then, of course, I've got a slot after work most days. But the big slots really were always at the weekends. So you can kind of even break your weekend down into slots as well. I always felt it worked best doing kind of like small, intense slots, and then having a break and then doing something different and then coming back to it, rather than just doing like a whole, 9 to 5, just sitting there all day. I always like to break it up a bit, but everybody's different and see what works best for you. So good thing about this, several things really. It obviously gives you a plan and a structure. I found it very reassuring because, yes, when you first start this and say you really struggle with employment income, there's so much to learn, I can't get my head around all the different national insurances. At least you can kind of sit back and think, well, look, I'm only at week 1. I've got, a certain amount of time here, and I've got enough time, because you've mapped out all of the topics. So you think, I've got enough time to cover everything. I've still got a few more days to get my head around this. Like, it's going to be okay. It's quite, for me anyway, it's a source of reassurance, having a plan, knowing that I'm going to get through it all. So once you've kind of got your plan kind of mapped out like this, another key advantage is you can actually make optimal use of all of the small times. Like, you might think here, oh, it's not a very long amount of time, or particularly with lunchtime, I've only got half an hour, I'm not going to be able to get anything done then. Well, actually, as I've just shown you, you could easily get a question done. You could easily do this employment income question. You could do it, mark it, and read the examiner's comments within half an hour. It's probably only worth 6 to 8 marks. So you definitely could do that within a lunchtime slot, or a before work slot. I mean, you could probably even do this kind of sitting on a train if you have to commute. So then I would start kind of building this out. And I think, well, employment income and trading income, these are big topics. You can see there by the length of the video. So I'd probably allocate those onto weekends. So employment, I understand like the technical content. You could have kind of like employment, and then you could have like the technical content there. And then maybe after, in the afternoons, you could just do questions, for example. But like I said, you could even do those kind of in the weekdays. And then maybe on Sunday, you could do like the trading income, again, making sure you've understood like the technical content and learnt the key rules, and then practice questions in your afternoon slots. Maybe the technical bit takes you longer and some of it spills into here and you just do some questions there. So they're obviously bigger topics. So I'd allocate those to the bigger slots. And then things like cash basis, that's really short. That's only half an hour, follows on from trading income. Maybe I'll watch the video in the morning, then at lunchtime I'll do a question, and then in the evening I'll do a few more questions on it. You could probably do a small topic like that easily in a day, and you can see just by grabbing an hour here, half an hour there, you've actually conquered another topic. Partnerships, obviously, really short as well. Do the same thing on the next day. Video in the morning, maybe don't have lunchtime, and then questions in the evening. So you can kind of see how actually breaking it down like this into these individual topics enables you to make the most of small little study slots because you've broken it down into such small bits. And then you kind of keep doing that, trading losses, video in the morning, question at lunch, maybe some more questions in the evening if you've got time, or it might go over, a few days. So you can kind of see, how I would, build that out, and I'd build that out over the however long you've got between when you start preparing and the exam. But TC there's a lot of content to cover. Most people are also doing this with other professional level exams, quite commonly FAR and AA. So you obviously need to feed those into your structure as well. So you need to think, maybe you're only going to have like 1, 2, 3 days a week for TC, maybe like 3 days for FAR and a day for audit, or, I'm not necessarily saying that's definitely the way you should do it. That's probably a bit light on audit, but however it is you're doing it, you might have to adjust it to make sure that you cover all of the topics. But if you're doing the same thing with FAR and audit as well, you can just build something out so that you make sure you cover every topic. Obviously, there's overlap between FAR and audit, so it might make sense to try and do similar topics for those on the same days. Like if you're covering assets for FAR, do audit risk and procedures on assets for AA on the same day or the day after, for example. So you can leverage between the overlaps on topics as well. So yeah, I would absolutely recommend having some sort of a plan. So you've got a clear structure to make sure that you're going to be able to cover all of the topics, and then leave the few weeks before the exam so you can start doing full exam papers. You can master every topic one at a time, but obviously as you get closer to the exam, you need to start doing full exam papers. So once you've covered them individually, then you're ready to just do the full exam. And obviously that's going to be kind of, those days are going to be more like, a few hours in the morning, 2.5 hours in the morning, then have a break, then maybe mark it, and then follow up on the areas where you drop marks. So you might need to then go back to certain areas, do a full exam, but you didn't perform very well on the CGT question because you missed some key relief. So therefore you want to go back, watch the video again, make sure that you are comfortable with the content, you understand when all of the reliefs apply, what they apply to, and then of course go and practice some questions on the CGT reliefs. Maybe it was a rollover relief that you didn't do particularly well on, and you want to go and focus on some questions there. So that's what to do in the build up to the exam. Break it down by topic, understand the content, and straight into those exam questions. So important to get into those exam questions early on for all the reasons I've explained. And this will just enable you to master each topic one at a time, and you have a clear study plan, and it will enable you to make the most out of your time. Remember to utilize your time most effectively because you've broken it down into smaller topics. So therefore you can make effective use of small little study slots that you have, which will accumulate into substantial gains over the long term. So then on exam day itself, but also this obviously applies to when you're practicing questions. Just when you're practicing questions, just pretend that you're in the real exam. And certainly when you get to the point of doing mock exams, I even used to like to do it at the same time of day. So I felt how I'm going to feel on exam day. And when you get into the exam day, it'll just feel very familiar. So you do your questions in the ICAEW software, don't have your own notes out, just only use the open book. So what's really important is that you allocate your time and attempt every question. So the purpose of allocating your time is so that you attempt every question. And the real reason for this, and this is a really important point to appreciate, is that every question has some easy marks, some medium marks, and some hard marks, but they're all worth a mark. An easy mark scores a mark, a really hard mark scores a mark. So, what I mean by this is in this employment income question, some of these bits will be really easy. Salary is just so easy. It's just taxable. We didn't even have to deal with national insurance here. It's probably it is the easiest amount you're going to see in an employment income calculation. I mean, you'll do this as you go through questions. You'll just see, putting a salary in is such an easy mark. Whereas, some other amounts might be quite tricky. I mean, some of the amounts with the car, I mean, this is probably quite a hard point. The capital contribution capped at 5K, that's a hard, but they're probably, worth the same. So obviously you want to make sure you get this one. This is really easy, get the easy marks first, grab all of the low hanging fruit. And then, yes, if you can get these as well, great. But the key to getting, the key to the strong base of a pass is getting all of those easy and medium marks. And they've got this on every question. So even in the trading income part, there'll be some really easy marks, like knowing that revenue is taxable. Or, for example, a third party entertaining disallowable, that's an easy mark. But there'd probably be some difficult marks about calculating their national insurance, that like employers' national insurance, for example, and then knowing that's deductible, that's quite difficult. So in almost all questions, there's enough easy and medium marks to get you up to usually around about 70% of the marks. And then there's always really some hard parts. So you want to hard marks. So you want to make sure that you attempt every question so that you get the easy and medium marks on each. Now, for example, you don't want to spend an excessive amount of time here on the employment income trying to perfect the car calculation if it's got some difficult points, or there's some points you just don't kind of really know, or you're struggling of which value to use here, for example, and you just don't know it. And the rest of the question was quite easy and you feel like you've got the easy bits here already. This is just going to be a hard bit, then just move on and make sure you move on in enough time so that you can do the trading income part of the calculation and get the easy marks there. And then you can get onto the property part of the question and get the easy marks there. There's a simple loss here as well to include. So, make sure you move on and get that. And then there'll be some easy marks on the next part of the question as well, like calculating these net disposable income questions. As we'll see when we look at the class for that, there's always some really, really easy marks there, because it's just going to be his income minus his expenses. And then, tax is just one of those expenses. So then we'll get on to calculating the tax. But putting his income in, putting his expenses in is really easy. So you want to make sure that you allocate your time to each question based on the marks. And it's easy to do in the TC exam because they give you the marks breakdown for each sub-requirement. So therefore, you've got your 2.5 hours in the exam. So therefore, you've got 1.5 minutes per mark. You might want to adjust that slightly for reading time so that you know how long you should be spending on each question, but you want to make sure that you attempt every question and get the easy marks on each. So then a few other slightly smaller points, but just make sure that you use a scenario and answer the exact requirement. See this a few times, really. The examiners might ask for just the calculation of employment and trading income, but individual students will just go through and do the full income tax computation, multiply through all the bands when it isn't necessary. So you're just wasting time, not scoring any marks. So make sure you read the requirement carefully. Other times they might say something like they do not wish to make an election for gift relief, but students will still do a calculation for gift relief. So sometimes the question isn't really read properly. And then make sure you use the information in the scenario as well. So sometimes students don't really read the information in the scenario itself and don't always use that correctly in the answer. So just make sure you're reading very carefully the information that you're given by the examiner in the exam. And then use your open book for specific rules or specific areas. So as I said, there's a lot of content that you need to learn for TCE, but there is a lot of useful information like in the open book, for example, like the car thresholds, they're obviously included in the open book. Like the residency tests for like the international aspects, you're not going to need to memorize those. They're all in the open book, like deemed domicile rules, residents when the taxation on gains came in there. So there's lots of areas where the open book is really, really useful. Corporation tax, payment dates, that's really useful as well. So whilst you do need to memorize a lot of content, make sure you leverage off that open book where you can. And throughout the course, there's points where I'd say you'll probably should know this point going into the exam, like the personal allowance. I don't think you need to be looking that up in the exam. I think you would have practiced so many questions, you'll just know that. That's fine. CGT annual exemption, another example of areas where it's just easier to learn it and quicker to learn it. But there's some areas like corporation tax, payment dates, income tax, payment dates as well. Some of the international areas of income tax and CGT, where I would definitely recommend looking that up. Quick succession relief for IHT, simplified tests for VAT, all examples of, there's quite specific rules there. I would suggest probably looking that up in the exam. And obviously that kind of reduces the burden on you really in terms of what you have to memorize. I mean, know what the issue is, broadly what the rule is, but the very specifics, you could look that up in the open book. So in terms of other resources we have available, we have our TC video course, and there's a free sample class available for that. So I've explained throughout, I've said, the key thing to do really is to make sure that you've understood the technical content and then immediately after go and practice questions. And that's exactly how the TC course works. That's my belief in the best way to approach these exams. That's exactly what we'll do. During the class on employment income, I'll explain exactly how employees are taxed, how the different amounts are calculated, how national insurance applies, but then immediately after, I'll go and work through some exam questions. So you can see the specific exam technique you should be using when working through exam questions. And this will help you to achieve similar levels of success in your TC exam. So the course just goes through and just breaks it down by topic, just like this. This is the course structure from the video course, breaks it down by topic. I teach the technical content and then work through recent exam questions. So I cover every topic and each type of question as well. So for income tax, as you can see here, you can get a big question calculating the income tax payable, which covers various schedules of income. And we've made that the free sample video. So if you go to the ACA Masters website and go to the TC page, you can see here we've got this free sample class here. And it covers this question that I've just been referring to here. So employment income, trading income, there's a bit on pensions, property income, how to use a trading loss, income tax payable. And then there's also those separate questions, sub-requirements on net disposable income, marginal and effective tax rates as well. So that's a really useful resource if you haven't watched that already. So that's taken from the video course, which covers every topic and every question type. That's just a work through of a full exam question, this question here. So that's a really useful resource available. We've had some great success with students with their results on their TC exams. So then we've got our TC materials as well, which I've been referring to as well in this class. So I would suggest this really simplifies TCs. You can just focus on learning the key points, obviously highly condensed from the ICAEW workbook, covers all of the different areas as I've just demonstrated, like with employment income and trading income. And so you can make sure you've understood the key points. Nice, simplified and concise document. And once you've learnt the key points, you can then go to the master plan section and practice all of the recent questions which examined the topic. So then on LinkedIn, I regularly post like exam tips and things like that. So please feel free to add me on LinkedIn. It would be nice to connect. There's also the ACA Masters company page as well, where we post useful information. Then we've also got our YouTube channel where there's other TC videos available there as well for other ACA subjects. You'll obviously probably preparing for other exams at the same time, and you certainly will be in the future. And then we've also got the blog as well on the ACA Masters website, which has got a specific article on TC, but it's also got articles on the other exams, and then some other articles kind of, as I've been explaining here, about getting the easy marks and the importance of that. So I hope you've found this class useful, and that's going to help you have some structure for your preparation for your TC exam, and you can start to appreciate how your preparation and the way you approach it is kind of really important in terms of like optimizing your time. And then as you work through questions as well, you'll start to see what I mean about getting these easy and medium marks, and you'll be able to really put that into practice as you practice more questions. And then, like I said, we've got a TC video course which covers every single topic that you need to master for the exam, and throughout that I'll be teaching you what the easy marks are on each question, how you should be working through each topic, the key points for each topic, and simplifying the topic so it's really nice and easy to understand, and then just demonstrating that optimal exam technique, which enabled me to achieve high levels of success in my exams, and also so many of our other students. So very much look forward to helping you get through your TC exam with top marks.